Welcome to League Night, everybody. I am here joined with Jamie Thomas. We've also got special guest Terry Miller, everybody, the disc golf guy. There he is. Welcome to the show, Terry. It's great to have you. We're going to be doing an OTB Open recap, so let's get right into it. Here we are, Paige Pierce having a strong weekend. Jamie, tell us about it.
Yeah, Paige Pierce getting her 50-something tour win in her career. What a storied career she's already had, but she had to fight quite a bit, guys. There was some struggles. The first day, she's the only player under par. Second day, she comes out with a 10 down. She's the only player next to Anthony Barella finding double digits on this
course record. Am I wrong?
Course record at this new Swenson Park layout, but final day, only an even. She had to fend off a tremendous charge from Natalie Ryan on the final day. And I remember Natalie was in that post-round interview round 2 saying, I'm going to come out aggressive. She came out like 4 out of the first 5, really put some pressure on the 5-time world champion. And we were kind of wondering, is Paige going to mess this up? Not to be overly critical, but Paige, we'll talk about it in a little bit, never lost when she goes into the final round with a 5+ stroke lead.
And she had 9 strokes. Nobody thought there was going to be a comeback. And I'm not even sure Natalie thought that originally, but she said after the first few holes, getting a turkey to start it out, she thought, oh, I might have a chance here at Paige. Pushed it all the way to there was no stroke separation going the last 2 holes. And you can see Paige is able to secure it here. What an awesome win for Paige, holding off the charging Natalie Ryan. Incredible.
Yeah. I'd hit a pretty big putt on the 18th there too. They were talking about this hole at the newly redesigned Swenson Park, and they were modeling it after the fort from Worlds last year, trying to find a way to really get some drama in there on the 18th, and got close there for a minute, but Paige Pierce able to hold it off. Terry, yet another win for Paige Pierce this year. It's impressive.
It certainly is. And when you think about players that have a 9-stroke advantage, you think, well, if they're inexperienced or they're not used to winning, yeah, that certainly is in jeopardy. Paige Pierce, I would bet my house on it. When she's got a 9-stroke lead going into a final round, I'd bet my house plus my entire disc collection. That's where the real value is.
That's a lot. So Simon Lizotte here. Crazy. He thought, that was a great win by Paige, and he steps up and he went into this final round feeling almost as if things were just easy. He said it just came to him. He said it was just his time. He kept telling himself, let me put it this way. This doesn't matter. Nobody cares. I don't care. just play this out. And he did it. Jamie, what do you think about this? How did his performance go?
Well, Simon climbed the lead card. He was on it, but not in the lead after day 1. I think he was in 4th and moved his way up to 2nd, and then ended up, on the top of that, or I guess by the end of the 2nd round, he was in the lead. But Simon, it's impressive. The guy is practicing slightly less, having to, do daddy duty and then fly out just before. You guys remember those days when the young kids, it's hard to leave home. He didn't fly in until like late Wednesday. So one practice day, comes out throwing 80%. And my goodness, look, everybody loves a Simon win. Getting the crowd involved, you gotta love it.
This win definitely had a different feel to it, for sure. Terry, you've seen a lot of wins. Did this one have any special feelings for you?
Yeah, just knowing that he's proven he can still win. Of course, we'll talk about the length of time in between this and when the last time he hoisted a trophy at an Elite Series event. But this proves to him that he still has the skills and he can go out and get it done with the best of them.
That's right. What an awesome victory for Simon and Paige Pierce, both of them having tremendous weekends at the OTB Open at Swenson Park, a disc golf course on a golf course. So we're going to move into our next topic here, which is a discussion surrounding Paige Pierce and Simon Lizotte. They had a great weekend, but we want to talk about what does this mean for them? So Jamie, would you kick it off for us? Pierce defends the OTB title. She does it again, her 3rd victory of the season. You can see here what you already mentioned as her stat. When she's had 5 or more strokes going to final round, she's never lost. What does this win mean to her, Jamie? What do you think it means for her? We don't know for sure what it means to her, but what do you think it means for her?
Well, I think it's just it's finally in gear this season. I mean, we've been talking so much this year when Valerie Mandujano won Waco, when Kristen Tatar was dominating just before she left back for Estonia. Katrina Allen came out of the gate just throwing flames for drives, and Paige kind of took a back seat in the media and sort of the attention that's usually on her as the standard setter. And now, with the third win of the year, one of those being a major, incredibly important to remember that. So I think this is getting back into gear. And this is another one of those scenarios where I think we risk not talking enough about what she's doing to keep her legacy going because she has been the gold standard for so long. It's easy to take this for granted.
Okay, take it for granted. And I want to keep this conversation on Paige Pierce, but I think there's a little bit here to expand on and saying that arguably the number one competitor in this season so far, Kristen Tatar, not here. How important was it for Paige to win this event? What do you think, Terry?
You know, what has been really interesting, I think one of the big takeaways from the press conference was Paige talking about how she's not fully prepared, how she hasn't been putting in quite the work, and then she still comes out and wins. And I don't know if that means as much to her as the story it tells to the rest of the field, which is, I'm not practicing, I'm not fully prepped, but I'm still going to come out here and play some incredible golf. That's really scary for the rest of the field. Now, you say Kristen Tatar's not present. Would Kristen have put up a better fight against her? Possibly. Of course, woulda, coulda, shoulda. We'll never know that. But a somewhat, we'll say, even rusty or underprepared Paige Pierce still dominating, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, she talks about the course being largely overhauled to a place where she wasn't familiar with it. And she was able to do this. I agree. That's a significant note to make there in regards to her performance. Yeah, I think for her, she had a lot of things on her mind. I've heard her since her win that her mind has been all over the place. It races, it thinks about all different things while she's out there playing. In fact, did you notice the earbud in her ear? This is the first time that she has ever done this in her career. She's listening to music that centers her thoughts in happy places, if you will. She considers it a large advantage. She notes, hey, right now it's not against the rules, and I think it's an advantage for me. I'm going to start using the earbud to center myself with some good music. What else do you guys have on this? Paige Pierce, any closing thoughts, Jamie?
Yeah, so I got to go out there this weekend, and by the way, we should not get away from this conversation without talking a little bit about Natalie Ryan and the performance that she had, because we did talk about Kristen Tatar, and sure, she's been a great challenger, but I mean, 9 strokes down, look on the screen, Paige has never lost in that scenario, and Natalie put it to a tie. And I think the shot on 17 for Ryan is going to hurt her for a little while. That's going to be that mental fuel, that drive to get back and kind of correct that mistake. But, you know, I want to make sure we give credit where credit is due, because amazing golf was played, even if it wasn't necessarily by a Kristen Tatar or a Katrina Allen pushing for the win. That said, let me give you a little story from this weekend about Paige. So we're on 17, we're on the tee box, and there's a bit of a wait because the chase card is still playing ahead. You know, tough tee shot. You really got to think about your line there. The gallery is surrounding the tee box, and I see this young man who had bought a disc, and he's kind of just, you know, practice swinging over there, just super excited to be there. Paige, earbud in and all, sees him out the corner of her eye, walks over there and gives him a little tip, just says, okay, put your elbow here and then pull back like this, right in the middle. And then 60 seconds later, she's lacing that drive through the trees, getting herself in position. I'm like, I mean, come on, that's GOAT status right there. Could take the time out for a fan in that moment.
For sure. You bring up Natalie Ryan, and we all know how important experience is. You don't arrive at the top and just find yourself winning. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. I can go back and remember Eagle. I think it was a major in Australia. Wasn't it the Australian Open at one point? A significant,
Open, yeah.
Significant lead going into the final holes. And what he would even say was a choke. And we've seen it time and time again with other players. I'm not calling Natalie Ryan's performance at the end a choke, although she wishes she could take it back. She said she struggled with the whole 17 all weekend. But it's experience, and you can't buy experience. So this has to be looked at as a positive for her. And Paige considered it a great battle to the end and was really proud of her performance. All right, let's take it from Paige Pierce to talk about the other fan favorite, or one of the fan favorites, Simon Lizotte. He fends off Heimburg, which is it true that this is possibly the most that anybody's ever rooted against Calvin Heimberg? They wanted to see a Simon Lizotte win. You can see here on the screen 1,541 days since his last tour win. This goes all the way back to the Memorial Championship at Fountain Hills and Vista. Oh, what? Yeah, Vista.
Vista del Camino. Yep.
I'm
Shot
having one of
course.
those brain freezes. It's Vista. That's how I know it. Terry, what do you think? I mean, we've seen a few ups and downs out of Simon, including injuries. But we've also seen now he's a dad. He has a house. But a lot of things have happened. We had his last, I would say one of his last better performances was the Preserve a few years ago. This year he's come out of the gate with a few other good ones. What do you think this means for Simon, in your opinion, Terry?
Well, I mean, if we're going to use somewhat of a common phrase, let's look at the trend this year: 60th, 35th, 6th, 2nd, and now 1st. You can't trend any better than what he's doing. A very slow, a little bit of a rough start, of course, to knock the rust off and get things, get into the swing of things to get the season started. But the last 3 events, 6th, then 2nd, and now 1st, Simon proving that he's here and he's here to compete right now.
That's right. In an interview since the win, he said, "My trend is going up." He goes, "There's nowhere else to go. I guess I've reached the top." And I said, "Worlds, Simon. Worlds is your opportunity. Think bigger." Simon, what do you think this means for Simon? I mean, Jamie, what do you think this means for Simon?
There's a compliment, huh?
Yeah. Matt's just seen me throwing lately. No, I definitely don't feel like Simon. Yeah, Worlds. Wow. The high fives around that ring of a gallery will be massive if you were able to pull off something like that. I think, the natural inclination is to say, okay, next stop, major. He's been the face of European disc golf for a long time, and we do have a lot of other players coming up, especially in the FPO division, that are sort of challenging that notion. I mean, especially now that he's a Massachusetts boy, but he's held that banner for so long that we want to say this next trend is go out and get a major for all the European disc golfers, for the legacy of disc golf across the pond. But at the same time, like you said, Terry, the trend, well, part of the reason that it started lower on that leaderboard at the beginning of the year is I think his son was maybe like 4 weeks old or something like that. I mean, it was really, really soon that he had to get back out and get in competitive form. So I think it's just enjoy the ride. And it seems to me that for Simon, that's been the key to success. A little less pressure, a little bit less of like having to hold the weight of a continent and as a representation on his shoulders. And he could just kind of go out and be him. And by the way, that 80% thing, maybe not the Simon line every single time. I know that's like the prudent, boring thing to do, but it's posting results right now.
80% is 80% more than most people's 100%. So he's excellent. I think you've nailed a really good point there, Jamie, because I was having similar thoughts that why is Simon trending up? And I have to believe a lot of it has to be a pressure relief in some ways, coming out of an injury rehab, having the child, finding himself in a place of, I actually do love this sport. I don't care necessarily if I win or I don't. I know it's in me, but I'm just going to come out here and just play. And I think having that relief, we know in the sport, it's such a big deal to have your mental game in a place where you can be relaxed, where you're not stressing the shots. And he said that's how it was for him in the final round. You have to believe being a dad now, I know that's been a part of this conversation as well. Being a dad gives him a different perspective on life. And I know the Simon lines and the routes that he throws, everybody enjoys seeing, and he still wants to show off. But I think his perspective has shifted a little bit when it comes to his game. Anybody agree with that? You feel like he's shifted his perspective at all?
Well, he certainly said, I feel like in his post-round interview, that he realizes what it takes to play now smarter golf. And if smarter golf and playing at that 80% is going to lead him to a podium or lead him to a top finish, then maybe, dare we use the word maturity? Maybe that's come into play just a little bit more. And he realizes in order to be the most competitive player that he is and to sport or wear the shield, so to speak, for Discmania, that's how he needs to go about it. And my only other thought along with his mentality is, 1,541 days. When I had the pleasure of hanging out with Simon a week ago, he was using a milestone of 100. 100 days since his son had been born.
There you
So
go.
I have to wonder, as I'm getting kind of chills thinking about it, again, different perspectives. What does have that meaning? What has that impact to him right now? When you compare 1,541 days versus him knowing when his 100 days was for when his son was born, it's all very touching, and it's all very impactful for sure for that family.
Absolutely. He's made mention of the fact that his son only gets to be a few months old once in his life. And I think you're right. His perspective is shifting. Will we not see the Simon lines anymore? What do you think, Jamie?
Oh, we'll see it. I mean, I think it's just going to be more selective. And you know what? Honestly, that's better for all of us, because if he is able to take advantage of that unique wrinkle to his game just in those selective moments, I mean, that's the kind of thing that could separate him. If he can learn to play, as he's called it, the Macbeth style of golf, and still incorporate that thing that makes him special and that draws so many people to him, I think the future is bright. Now, look, at the same time, if you're not practicing as much on the course, certainly you could get into some situations. So, I'm not going to, I won't, as dear of a friend as Simon is, like, I won't go out and say, like, he's the person to beat this year. But I do think we can put him in that contender category pretty much any given weekend. If he can come out and do this on a new layout with, relatively little practice and perform like that, it's going to make it harder to, how do you even pick these days? I don't know how you pick winners these days. It's crazy.
He says making top 20 is a big deal nowadays, and that's even his perspective. To have the win, he's obviously proud about it. I would say that, yeah, he views himself as a contender, but he doesn't go into these rounds saying, I am the favor, or I am going to be the one to beat. He's waiting for it to come to him, and I don't think that's a bad mindset, but it's different than others. Like, I think Paul Macbeth probably goes in choosing and mind select saying, I am here to win today. Ricky Wysocki, Paige Pierce. These mindsets are different than Simon's, but congratulations to Simon. Everybody loved it. We're going to look at it again later. His victory lap, high-fiving the fans. He is a fan favorite for sure. Let's take this conversation to the next avenue here of talking courses. Specifically, let's talk about Eagle missing the OTB Open. He has an injury that's been sustained here for a little bit. He re-aggravated it. OTB Open would be a course that you would assume that he would thrive at. Now, with his health in question, let's go ahead and bring up this topic here of as far as distance goes. Okay. And you can look at the stats here. Shout out. Thank you to our friends over at Statmando for this. The MPO average hole has increased by 90 feet in the MPO division since 2017. So about 5 years here, 4.5 years, 90-foot increase on the average hole distance. You go to the FPO, 45-foot increase since 2017. And here's something for you to consider as a listener and as a fan of the sport. If I asked you to go out today and try to throw 45 feet further on your drives, how long is that going to take you to accomplish? I know for me, the amateur skilled player, I can't just go out and add 45 feet. What does this mean for the sport, Jamie?
Well, it's very interesting because we're starting to see, and I'd love to get some more injury trend data to really back this up or to debunk this. But from the eye test, we are seeing players more frequently pop up with some injuries. I mean, Eagle is notably absent this year to defend his title. If you look back just a year ago, Sarah Hokum, she got injured right around this time last year, wasn't able to compete at the OTB Open. So we're starting to see, and there have been actually the same number of holes played from the beginning of the season through May last season and this season, same number of events as well. That's 7, not counting the Silver Series. So if you're out Silver Series grinding, you put even more miles on the body. And some of the players are starting to react to this. I want to let Terry jump in, but let me set you up here. The total feet distance of holes, certainly this, not everybody throws it straight down the fairway every time, but let's just do, as the bird flies here, total number of feet distance of holes that have been played on tour this year for MPO, 237,526. That's an average. As you see, hole distance is 550. We're up over this 500 mark for the first time since 2017. We took out the 2016 Pro Tour season just because it was a shortened season, and we can take 2020 with a grain of salt, obviously, because of how COVID affected the tour. but the FPO distance is up as well. We're talking almost 500 feet of average distance per hole. It's no wonder when you kind of put two and two together anecdotally that we're starting to see some injuries. We're seeing some fatigue. We're seeing a little more of a delta in the finishes of some players that, although they are incredibly talented, they've got a few more miles, a few more years on their body from the tour life than some of these younger players are that are going to snap back a lot quicker. And some of these pros are starting to take notice, right, Terry?
They certainly are. And my own research department, including the calculator here on my screen, tells me that this weekend, you just said that the average hole distance is about 550 now on the MPO side, week in and week out. This weekend specifically, the 11,727 feet comes out to 651 and a half feet average per hole. So again, at home, everybody, just think if you went out to play golf this afternoon, or you're going to go play tomorrow, and you stepped onto a course and the average hole length was 651 feet, what does that do to you and your body by the time you and your buddies, and which buddy are you dragging along by the end, or which one's in the wagon that you're bringing in on hole 18? So think about it that way, 651 feet per hole. Now, the other concept that we're talking about in terms of the fatigue and what it's doing for our players, I'm actually would defer, and we have to bring in at some point the real expert here. We'd have to bring in Seth Muncy of Disc Golf Strong. And one thing that he's constantly talked about that is even ingrained in my head, even though I'm just walking the courses, pitch count, throw count. Those are very common terms that, of course, get used in professional baseball and in other sporting activities. And now it is a conversation that I actively hear our players talking about. We hear the Simons and the Eagles and other competitors right now talking about how often they're going to be throwing, what it means for practice, and then what it means for playing these tournaments in and out. And when you're averaging 651 feet a hole, your throw count is certainly going to go up. So those are all things that the players are talking about. And does that mean bigger is better? Do we want that distance constantly increasing? I don't know. That almost then turns over to an entire conversation about course design, and what does the course design give us? And does that course design provide us the best possible golf? I think that's the real question.
Okay. I love how you pulled out the calculator. I did the same here. And when you look at this title here, the average course length for 2022 is 9,897 feet. Okay. And you break that calculator out, you come up with about 100 feet shorter than what we just saw at the OTB Open. So the average course this year is playing 100 feet shorter than what we saw at the OTB Open. And the FPO here, you can see, is 8,925 feet. Let's go ahead and pull this graphic up here, because this is average distance per course by year. Jamie, tell us what we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to figure out, and I think it's especially drastic in FPO. Look, some years it goes up, some years it goes down. As we see sort of the middle of the pack of FPO start to fill out, meaning more touring players, more folks that you're going to see week in and week out versus sort of the drawing just the local and regional. I think that's a design challenge that we're going to look at as a sport and decide what we're going to place a premium on. Is distance the overarching thing that we want to place a premium on for our athletes in FPO, or do we want to design for other skill sets? I mean, certainly topography is going to come into play here depending on where you are in the country. But, let me tell you, I've been playing disc golf in Northern California for the last 12 years, and it's not the case that every course out here is a bomber course. I mean, maybe I always think of Colorado when I think of like big bomber courses, because it just seems like everybody that plays out of there just has a cannon for an arm. But it's something to think about as we go along. What skill set are we placing a premium on if you want to win the biggest purses and the most prestige here on the tour? And are we representing the region in the way that most disc golf is being played out there? So far be it from us to like answer those questions within the scope of the show, but certainly things we're thinking about.
That's a great observation, Jamie. Are we representing the region? And does that matter? But I think that's a great perspective, because I don't think the region necessarily boast, as you mentioned, these are our courses. But we are still seeing these courses be developed and designed. What do you believe the intention was here for the Pro Tour to bring on courses like this? What are the benefits here? What do you think, Terry?
Well, I think of where we're heading in a few weeks. I think of Glendoveer and the golf course that it is. And last year, I think that ended up being the single longest golf course, or the single longest course that was on the entire tour. I'm not sure how that looks versus what we're going to see in its variation this year. I think some redesign has happened. And then also they're going to be playing Blue Lake, which, featured the 2014 World Championships and this incredible playoff with Macbeth and Wysocki. But yet they're still very different courses, relatively flat and plenty of distance. But Blue Lake, the way that it was designed and the way that it was played, I feel like it wasn't just this wide open, go out and throw it as hard as you want style of course. I know there's this constant argument, and we're in a really unique position, the three of us, as we're in the media, and a lot of people will talk about the cellular signal for live. We'll talk about what it's like to go out and film and to follow and to have spectators at golf courses and courses that are of that style, as opposed to going to the narrow fairways of a Maple Hill or somewhere down in Charlotte. So we have those constant pros and cons. I'm uncertain where the future of our sport is going. And like you said, Matt, talking about, representing an area, and does Glendoveer, does, Swenson Park, does that represent, when you think of California golf, do you think of Swenson or do you think of some other park? I think that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, and Jamie being right now, I don't want to say a California native, but that's where you're located now. Is that how you feel? Is it underrepresented what the courses are actually like?
Technically, I'm a California native, but
that
goes
moved
way
around
back.
a few times. I don't
Yeah,
know
I've
your
been
full
around a few
history.
Down from Ian Anderson's neck of the woods. So yeah, I mean, if you talk about Stockton specifically, then yeah, the defense that Stockton has always been wind. It's heat and it's wind. In fact, the regional series tournament that historically has been played out in that city is called the Frying Pan, just to give you a little context there.
Wonderful.
So yeah, but I mean, California, I think when you look at the world champions from California in the MPO division, at least in the modern era, you're talking about Greg Barsby, Paul Macbeth, and Nate Doss. And none of those players, I'm not saying they don't throw far, they certainly do, but they're not, it's not the same type of player as a Drew Gibson, a Simon Lizotte, or an Eagle McMahon, right? So you're talking about players that have touch first and foremost. And when I think of California golf, especially Northern California golf, I think of players with a lot of touch. And in Northern California, it's about elevation, being able to play at different elevations. In Southern California, I think you really have to have a roller game. I think it's about, knowing your surfaces really well and how to play off of those. So, I mean, we could go on for hours about California golf, but generally, it's tough. This is a tough, I don't know how to get into it without going on for an hour, but it's a tough scenario.
Paul Macbeth from California and 5-time world champion.
Let me add in there real quick.
Yeah, getting there.
Ken Climo out of Florida. Cliff Stevens is not known as a long bomber course. That's the course he grew up and very much dominated at, well, among everywhere else. But Cliff Stevens is not a lengthy course. And Barry Schultz, of course, I'm partial, 2-time world champ and all the other accolades he has. The course that Barry Schultz grew up playing literally as a child is about 3,000 or 4,000 feet. All right. Wow. It was designed for big whammo, glow in the dark, frisbees, midnight flyers. And it has an average hole length of about 172 feet. And he's gone on to be one of the most iconic players of all time. So to completely kind of round out that conversation, our world champions, and you add all of those up and you're talking about 20 some world champions in the last 30 years, they've all come from a little bit more finesse style of play. So clearly distance hasn't paid off in that sense. But if the courses keep trending that way, then it might bode even better for the likes of Calvin Heimberg, along with Simon Lizotte and Eagle McMahon.
Right. And not going back too far, I think about 6 years now, if my calculations are correct, when the Pro Tour itself started, there was only a handful of events. We're already at the 7th event of this season, and we have 13 remaining. 13. That's incredible when you think back on the history of the Disc Golf Pro Tour. Now, I know the tour has been now joined up with the national tour, and it is the official tour. And that's part of it. You get a few more events. You still get some structure here that is expanding. But what does this mean for the injury risks? Now, Jamie, you already talked about this a little bit. And I think what's interesting here is because not just because of the fatigue does an arm get injured, but your whole body and mentality can now be more susceptible to even things like rolling your ankle or straining your neck muscle, things that you're doing because your body is overexerting. Are we running into any of that? I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, but what do you think when it comes to 13 remaining events?
Well, I think about the way this season plays out, and I think about that we've already had a stretch of 3 events in 3 weeks. And you could extend that again if you're a Silver Series grinder. There were, you've got Tallahassee and Music City and things like that happened before the stretch that I'm talking about, which is Champions Cup through the Dynamic Disc Open. And we're going to have a big stretch to end the season. I've been calling it the grand finale. It's like a fireworks show. We're going to have these 5 events in 7 weeks, starting with Worlds,
Wow.
going to the playoffs for the Pro Tour, the US DGC and Pro Pink, and then the Tour Championship. I mean, I think it's going to be on players' minds how much gas are they going to have in the tank when they get back around to the East Coast, and at what point do you pick and choose to do some of these strategies like resting and relaxing. I think we definitely need to have Seth Muncie on soon to talk about these kinds of things, because it's more of a concern now. And I don't want to make this seem like, oh, the tour is just trying to grind its players into the ground. A little bit of a biased perspective working for the tour, but that's not the intent here at all. It's also the competitive nature of these divisions. These players are trying to get more distance. They're trying to range further putts. They want to stand out amongst their peers because of the opportunity that's on the table for them. So that's more training, that's more practice, that's more athletic, working in the off season than maybe was required in the past to stay competitive. So it's a year-round job for these folks at this point.
I say year-round job, and not every player, it goes without saying, right, does not make the $1 million a year contract that we're seeing some of these players have, or even some of our FPO players announcing significant contracts that mean they can play without concern of win. Maybe for their brand they want to win, but not necessarily to stay on the road. I think we're seeing some players continue to play all of these events and grind it out in hopes of earning a few extra dollars. So we have multiple conversations going on here. Terry, when it comes to this many events in a season, the courses are trending up in distance, as we mentioned. What do you think some of these players are going to have to make choices for? And are they going to be able to do that without, and I'll say this with a quotation mark, penalty from the tour? Because the penalty comes right now, there's so much value placed on the points that can be earned that sitting out can sometimes feel like they're being penalized. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, your question, actually, you didn't know it, was kind of setting me up. I was back here building a soapbox to jump up onto. I would love to see a standardization where we are no longer playing 4-round non-majors. And I hate to pick on the event, the next one, maybe in the Elite Series that's coming up in Portland, seeing that that's 4 days, or really just any event that is not a major. I don't want to see it as 4 rounds. I like the 3 rounds. We talk about the travel day on Monday and them getting to the next spot to then maybe relax for a day and then have a day or 2 at most to get their practice in. I really dislike seeing that. And I think if you're really a betting person, man, Portland sounds like a great weekend to take off, for instance. And I don't want anyone to think I'm ripping on Portland in any way, shape, or form. But if you're someone who maybe doesn't throw quite as far, and then you're looking at 4 rounds, you're thinking, wow, there is no better time to take off. Yes, I might take a little hit and that I might not pick up any points. But then again, what if you go and you only pick up 5 points and you've beat yourself up for 4 rounds? I think players are going to be very strategic. Sarah Holcomb talked about it between her injury and or just looking at the course last year. She didn't play OTB. It didn't appeal to her. And so she was strategic about the weekend she takes off. And in a similar way, we saw Eagle McMahon say, hey, I don't want to go play some of the wooded golf. I don't want to have to rely on throwing a forehand that's not fully healed. So I think players will become more strategic. There's a lot of opportunity to earn points, but there's also a lot of pressure to show up into play to get said points. I don't know. When it's all said and done, all that, toss that out the window. I want to see a 3-round standardization unless it's at another level.
Okay. Now, the injury risk that we're talking about is interesting here because there's a multifaceted look at injuries. We see, for instance, Ricky Wysocki playing with a Lyme disease flare-up. Now, I texted him and I asked him what that was about, not the flare up, but how come he continued to play on it? And he said, Matt, it's not going to make things worse for me to play on it. It is pain. I'm a competitor. I want to continue to compete. I don't want to sit out. And now we can understand that from the competitive mindset. But are we going to see more things like that from players playing through pain if it's not making things worse? Are we going to see players playing with some form of, we'll call it injury, as minor as it may be, continuing to play, saying, I'll make it through the season and then rest? It's going to be interesting. We see players like the NBA Finals now, not related at all to disc golf. But you see a player get injured. Now, as many as people want to say they're faking or not, but you see a significant injury happen and they're able to come out and maybe milk the last 3 minutes of the game because it's towards the end. I would say if it was a world championship or the United States Disc Golf Championship and you have an injury that you might be able to continue to play with, you're probably going to. So you really have to weigh what is on the line with this. And that's where I go back to the tour points matter. The schedule's packed. I think we're going to continue to see more injuries. You mentioned Seth Muncy. As far as the pitch count, the throw count, this is something that we're going to have to study more. And I'm glad that we have people like Seth Muncy in our sport to help us break this down. We'll have to get him on soon. But with all that being said, any final thoughts on this, Jamie?
I'm just giggling thinking about like a disc golfer missing a 20-foot putt and flopping.
Yeah,
I think we do see that. What are you talking about? I think we've seen that a few times.
Just roll over.
For the disc golfer, it's the missed putt and looking around it like, wow, the wind was much stronger than I thought. You know, like it's one of those. Or look at your fingers. What happened, right? Something like that. But any closing thoughts on this injury topic? Or are we moving on?
Oh man, we'll have to put out the Muncie signal. I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I think that there's not one answer here because, of course, with the way the sport has grown in the past 18 months, you know, since coming out of the pandemic, restarting the tour at the Dynamic Disc Open a couple years ago, there has just been such an incredible increase in interest, both from fans, both from tournaments. I mean, have any of you at home tried to get into a tournament lately? It's incredibly difficult at all levels. So I think that necessity being the mother of all invention, this is going to be something that we continue to think about and prioritize in the sport, especially as the players being the leading voices of our sport. And we want to see these guys and girls around for a long time. We don't want anybody's career cut short by injury. That would be the worst outcome.
Terry, you are a legend in the sport. You've been around a while with this. Is this the most packed professional schedule that you've ever seen?
Yeah. I mean, I was, you know, whenever I go anywhere and people are talking about, oh, what do you do for a living or a career? And I always kind of reply, yeah, I'm on the road like 40 some weekends a year. I mean, we have golf at some level every single weekend. And even if it's not something on the Elite Series or the Silver Series, well, then there's an age protected major going on, or there's an amateur major going on. We have golf every single weekend. There's plenty to play, plenty to participate in. It's absolutely incredible. And my last point on the injuries is maybe we're also hopefully nearing the end of self-inflicted injuries. We've seen people punching trees, punching the ground, maybe giving an elbow to a tree. I've seen that all. That dates way back to some legends that I know as well. Trying cartwheels or whatever was happening in air kicks to baskets this weekend. Yeah. Let's just, I mean, you know, and I know it's kind of a light joke with Drew, but just think if he would have fallen and like really hurt himself, how bad he would have felt for that to unfold. So let's hope any self-inflicted injuries out of frustration are also capped off right now.
You're right. You have me recollecting on I'll say fun for me memories, but not necessarily for the individual to look back on. You mentioned a packed schedule. There's disc golf you can participate in or play in, but you can also watch. Jamie, tell us how we're doing that for the Portland Open coming up next.
Well, we've been previewing it all show. We're going back to Portland, and we're keeping it weird. We've got 2 courses this year. The return of the legendary Blue Lake. I know that holds a dear place in so many of our hearts back from 2014. Terry, I know for you, certainly more than most. Glendoveer, going to be a lot of fun. If you are in the area, let me just let you know there's some really cool stuff happening. You got to check out our Instagram for the official information on all of it. But Bevelcraft Brewing is going to be out there. We're going to have our concert series, The Second Stop, June 2nd through 5th. It's 4 rounds, 2 at Glendoveer, 2 at Blue Lake. I can't wait to be up there. Check it out live on the Disc Golf Network. Of course, set your reminders. It's going to be a fun one.
It is going to be a fun one, and we're going to leave you tonight with this fun memory from this past tournament at the OTB Open with Simon Lizotte taking it down, giving his circle lap for the fans. Let's close out with this. Until next week, everybody, we'll see you out there. Good having you, Terry.
Thanks for having me.
OTB champion, Simon Lizotte.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present you the winner of the 2022 OTB Open presented by MVP Sports, Simon Lizotte.